Hi parents, this is a homework help video to support you with tonight's homework, which is 5-3. There's two portions to this, and your child should have also brought home a two-sided centimeter grid paper to do the homework on. The first one asks the children to draw as many rectangles as possible with a perimeter of 16 centimeters, and then write the rectangle dimensions here and then find the area. And then the second part ask the students to find as many or create as many rectangles as possible with an area of 16 square centimeters. Write the rectangle dimensions here and then find the perimeter and then find some patterns. And this can be tricky, so I wanted to do a video to kind of help you support your child through this homework. I'm going to start actually at the bottom first because I believe finding rectangles with that area is a little bit easier than finding the rectangles with a given perimeter. When you are finding rectangles with a given area, the children should think about what do I know? What factors do I know that multiply together to equal 16? They can list them out. So usually they can come up with, okay, I know 1 times 16 is 16. I know 2 times 8 is 16. I know nothing times 3 is 16, but 4 times 4 is 16. Nothing times 5 is 16. And then they'll see that there's only 3, and it does only give you 3 spaces, so that should help them as well. On the grid paper then, they should be drawing a 1 by 16 rectangle. So 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. And then they should be labeling it 1 centimeter by 16 centimeters. And then they should draw a 2 by 8 rectangle on the grid paper in a 4 by 4. Once those are drawn, they should be writing these dimensions here. So 1 centimeter by 16 centimeters, 2 centimeters by 8 centimeters, and 4 centimeters by 4 centimeters. And what I would encourage the children to do is actually, when they have to find the perimeter, write what the perimeter is in the middle, because that's going to help them kind of see the pattern. So they should think to themselves, okay, 16 plus 16 is 32, 1 plus 1 is 2, so this perimeter is 34 centimeters. Then they should write their perimeters here. I'm going to move on to the perimeter, but then at the end I'm going to go and talk about what they're asking for number 3 and number 6, which are comparing the shapes of the rectangles and what they notice about the pattern of the areas up here and the perimeters up here. I'll get to that at the end of the video. I'm going to move back up here. How are we teaching the children to find all the perimeters with a given, or all the rectangles with a given perimeter? The easiest way that I feel helps the children get them all is to encourage them to start with a rectangle that has a length of 1 on its short side. And then have them use past, like was in last night's video, pair, add, subtract, divide, to think, okay, 1 plus 1 is going to be 2. That's pairing the two sides of that rectangle. The perimeter is 16. So I'm going to do 16 minus 2. That's going to leave me with 14. That was the subtract. Then I divide it to find the other two sides of the rectangle. Divided by 2. 14 divided by 2 is going to be 7. So the first rectangle that has a perimeter of 16 is going to be a 1 by 7. Okay, and then I would move on to, let's try the short end having 2 centimeters. And let's figure out what the other length would be. They could do it again. So 2 plus 2 is 4. 16 is the perimeter, minus 4 is 12. 12 divided by 2 equals 6. So pretty soon they'll start to see a pattern. Most of them see it right away. Maybe they have to do one more rectangle to fully recognize it, but as this side goes up by 1, this length side goes down by 1. So then they can say, oh, if this is going to be 3 centimeters, then I can guess or infer that this one's going to be 5. and then they can check it to say, okay, 5 plus 5 is 10, 3 plus 3 is 6, 10 plus 6 is 16, and that's the perimeter. Great. And then what I encourage them to do is keep going until they would have a repeated rectangle. So this one would be 4 centimeters, and then this one would also be 4 centimeters. So this one would be a square, 4 by 4. And then if they were to keep going with the pattern, this would become 5 down here, and then that would become 3, and we already have a 5 by 3 rectangle here. So we know there's 4 rectangles, and also here it gives us 4 slots. So at this point, just like we did down here, we would put the dimensions of the rectangle, and then we would put the areas. So like we did with the perimeter, or with the one where we had to find all the rectangles with the same area, this is asking with all these rectangles that have a perimeter of 16, find their areas. So that's what we can do in the middle. 7 times 1 is 7 centimeters squared. 6 times 2 is 12 centimeters squared. And then they would write those areas here. Now, for the final part is these 2 questions, 3 and 6. It's asking for the pattern. Now, what I'm really hoping that they'll see, and that this is what we did in class, when they draw all of the rectangles that have a given perimeter, like we did here, and they find all the areas, which I'm going to do for you here. What I'm hoping that they notice is by shape that the narrower and longer a rectangle appears, comparatively that area is smaller than a rectangle that is closer to a square and a little bit wider on the inside. And oppositely, when we look at all of the rectangles that have a given area, I only drew one here, but the other one would be a 2 by 8. And the other one would be a 4 by 4. When we find the perimeters, we find kind of the opposite. The longer and narrower rectangles have a larger perimeter, and the closer they get to being a wider or more square-like rectangle, the less the perimeter is. So that's kind of what we're hoping that they'll notice. All of these rectangles had a given area of 16 square meters. And so when we find their perimeters, the long, narrow ones have a bigger perimeter than the more square-like rectangles. When given a given perimeter, which was 16 centimeters, when we find the areas, the longer, narrower rectangles have a smaller area than the wider, more square-like rectangles. And they should figure out, the children should figure out kind of how to word those patterns that they notice on problems 3 and 6. Good luck with homework tonight. Thank you so much.